There is one rule buried in every fairy tale humanity has ever told. A single commandment whispered through centuries of myth and dream. Never harm the helpful animal. Marie-Louise von Franz, Carl Jung's closest collaborator, discovered this strange law after decades of studying myths across cultures. She called it the one universal truth hidden in the world's oldest stories. Every tale contradicts another. Some praise honesty, others praise cunning. Some demand courage, others reward retreat. But one command repeats without exception: never hurt the creature that tries to help you. Why? Because the helpful animal is not an animal at all. It is a symbol, a mirror, a voice that lives inside every human being, guiding, warning, calling us toward what is right for us, not for the crowd. Von Franz realized that this creature represents something sacred, the inner instinct that knows before we think, the quiet intuition that pulls us toward meaning, that tells us when something feels alive or when something is wrong, even if no one else can see it. And yet, most of us betray it. We hear the whisper and we look away. We sense the path, but we stay where it's safe, where others approve. Every time we do, the animal bleeds a little more. Jung believed that this was not merely a poetic idea, but the foundation of psychological survival. To ignore the helpful animal, to silence the intuitive voice, is to sever ourselves from the very core of conscience. He wrote that conscience is a knowledge of emotional value, a kind of sacred knowing that reveals the worth of our actions. When we betray it, something inside begins to rot. You can live by every rule of society, follow every law, and still feel the quiet nausea of a life that isn't truly yours. That feeling is the wound of the helpful animal, the soul's protest against obedience to the wrong master. So the question is not whether the animal exists, but whether we still hear it. Have we become too civilized, too rational, too distracted to notice its voice? Or worse, have we already killed it? Every civilization teaches its children to listen to authority. But the ancients encoded another command: listen to the creature that hides beneath the noise of the world, the one that speaks in symbols, in dreams, in intuition. Because every time you silence that voice, something divine inside you fades. This was Jung's warning, and von Franz's revelation, that the most important rule of life is not about success, morality, or perfection. It is about loyalty. Loyalty to the invisible companion that tries to guide us home. Every culture claims to know what is right. Every religion, every ideology, every tribe draws its line between good and evil. But life, Jung warned, does not obey these lines. It moves through them, twisting, contradicting, evolving. Marie-Louise von Franz called this the rule of contradiction. She saw it in every story ever told. For every tale that says, fight evil, another says, walk away. For every hero who wins through honesty, another survives by deception. For every saint who turns the other cheek, a warrior strikes back and is praised. At first, von Franz found this disturbing. She wanted moral clarity, a universal law that stood firm across time. But the fairy tales refused to cooperate. They whispered a harder truth. There is no single path through the labyrinth of life. Every human being faces situations that no system, no scripture, no code can perfectly resolve. And in those moments, we are forced into the unbearable responsibility of choice. That, Jung believed, is where the soul begins. Not in obedience, but in confrontation with contradiction. It is through the tension of opposites that the self is born, the living center that chooses not either or, but both and. Von Franz wrote that only when the basic material of the psyche is contradictory can individuality exist. If life were simple, if right and wrong were always clear, we would never awaken the part of us that decides. We would remain children, pure perhaps, but unconscious. To live consciously, then, is to live within paradox. It is to stand between the poles of truth and falsehood, mercy and justice, instinct and reason, and to forge a third path, your own. That is the true alchemy of the soul, turning contradiction into consciousness. But most people flee from this tension. They want certainty, not freedom. They prefer someone else's commandments over their own discernment, and so they live according to the borrowed ethics of their tribe, mistaking imitation for virtue. Yet the fairy tales, those ancient maps of the psyche, reveal a deeper wisdom. They teach that contradiction is not a flaw in creation, it is its design. Because without contradiction, there can be no decision. Without conflict, there can be no conscience. And without conscience, there can be no individual. So the paradox of human morality is this: the same force that divides us, that fills our lives with doubt and confusion, is also what grants us freedom. The question is whether we will face it or flee it. For the next stage of the journey begins where most people stop, at the moment when the world's voices grow silent, and the only sound left is the one that rises from within. If the helpful animal of the old story still lives inside us, then its language is not words but feeling. It does not shout, it stirs. It rises as a whisper in the gut, a quiet certainty that something is right, or terribly wrong. Jung called this inner knowing conscience, a sacred kind of awareness that reveals the emotional truth behind our motives. It is not moral instruction from society, but direct contact with something older, deeper, and far more mysterious. When this voice speaks, it rarely uses logic. It moves through intuition, through symbols, through that strange sense of resonance that tells you without explanation, this way. Sometimes it warns us, an unease before a decision, a tension in the body that says don't do it. Other times it pushes us forward with the warmth of recognition, the pulse of aliveness that comes when our soul aligns with its path. But this is where the real battle begins, because the inner voice does not always agree with the outer world. It can contradict the rules of our family, the expectations of our community, the moral codes we were taught to obey. And when it does, we feel the split between belonging and integrity, between safety and truth. To follow conscience may mean exile. It may mean losing approval, respect, comfort, yet to betray it is worse. For when you silence this voice, you silence the compass that keeps your life aligned with meaning. Jung wrote that conscience commands the individual to obey his inner voice, even at the risk of going astray. It is not concerned with reputation or conformity. It demands loyalty to what is alive within you, not to what is merely accepted around you. And so most people refuse it. They choose peace with the crowd over peace with themselves. They follow what is safe, what is expected, and then wonder why their days feel hollow, why their smiles are strained, why their victories taste of dust. That emptiness is not failure. It is the cry of the animal within, the living part of the soul that has been caged by fear and obedience. Every time you choose against that voice, you build a life that does not belong to you. And the longer you live it, the quieter the voice becomes. Until one day, you cannot hear it at all. The ancient stories called this moment the death of the helper. Jung called it the death of conscience. Both mean the same thing, a human being cut off from the inner guide that makes life sacred. So the question remains, when your inner voice speaks next, will you listen or will you betray it once again? From the moment we are born, the world begins to train us. We learn what to say, what to want, what to fear. We are rewarded for obedience and punished for the sin of standing alone. By the time we reach adulthood, our instincts have been buried under layers of approval and expectation. We mistake politeness for virtue, silence for wisdom, and belonging for peace. But conscience has no interest in belonging. It speaks not to please, but to awaken. And when it rises against the collective voice of society, a war begins within the soul. Jung wrote that most people cannot bear this conflict. They fear the isolation that comes from disobedience more than the emptiness that comes from self-betrayal. So they silence their conscience with excuses. It's not the right time. I have responsibilities. I'll listen later. But later never comes. And each act of denial builds another wall between the self and the truth. You can deceive the world. You can even deceive yourself. But the body keeps score. It feels the tension, the unease, the quiet sickness that grows when your life no longer fits your soul. Jung warned that social morality, though necessary, often becomes a disguise. We wear it like armor, and it protects us from judgment, but it also protects us from transformation. Because conscience does not always speak in moral language. Sometimes it asks for rebellion. Sometimes it whispers that the good citizen must become a heretic, that the perfect student must unlearn. that the loyal follower must finally walk away. To obey that voice is dangerous. It can break families, friendships, entire identities. It can leave you standing alone, with nothing but your own awareness for company. But that is also where the real life begins, where the individual steps out from behind the mask of the collective and meets the world naked, uncertain, but true. Those who disobey conscience lose their peace, but those who obey it lose their comfort. Every human must choose which loss they can bear. And still the fairy tales remind us, the hero never finds the treasure by staying in the village. He leaves the known world, guided only by a voice no one else can hear. Society offers safety. Conscience offers freedom, and between them stretches the battlefield of every human soul. There is a moment in every life when silence becomes unbearable, when the smile you wear no longer fits your face, when the life you built begins to feel like someone else's story. That moment is not failure, it is a symptom, the sign that the soul has been living against itself for too long. Jung called it the sickness of the self. Dostoevsky saw it as the slow decay of conscience, a hidden disease that grows not in the body, but in the truth we refuse to live. It begins quietly, a faint sense of falseness, a hollow feeling after doing everything right. You obey the rules, you earn respect, you achieve what others call success. And yet something inside whispers, this is not it. At first you try to ignore it. You work harder, talk louder, move faster. You drown the voice in noise and routine. But the animal within does not die easily. It claws at the walls of your perfection until the cracks begin to show. Then come the symptoms: irritation, fatigue, resentment, a strange longing for something you cannot name. You tell yourself it's stress, or age, or circumstance. But deep down, you know. It is the soul's protest against the lie of your own life. Dostoevsky wrote that conscience is what makes us human. To betray it is to begin our own dehumanization. Because when the voice of truth is silenced, nothing inside can grow straight again. You can still function, still smile, but your inner world begins to rot. Regret replaces meaning. Shame replaces peace. And soon, guilt becomes the only proof that something sacred still lives within you. It is a slow death, not of the body, but of the real self. The self that once felt alive, curious, raw, unfiltered. The one that could look at the world with wonder and feel the pulse of something divine beneath it all. Most people call this state depression. Jung called it disconnection from the self, the great forgetting of who we are meant to become. But even this sickness has a purpose. Pain, in Jung's view, is the psyche's final attempt to get your attention. It is the cry of the helpful animal, the alarm of the soul demanding to be heard. If ignored, it will consume you. If faced, it will transform you, because the same fire that burns the false can illuminate the true. And only by walking through that inner sickness can we begin to remember the voice we silenced long ago. That is the paradox of healing. The soul must first break to be made whole again. When you finally decide to follow your conscience, you may think the war is over, but that is when the second battle begins. The one fought not against the world, but against your own mind. For conscience has a shadow, a double. A false voice that speaks in the same tone, uses the same words, and wears the same face as truth. Jung called it the false conscience. The devil disguised as the angel within. It tells you that what you fear is righteous, that what you crave is holy, that your vengeance is justice and your weakness compassion. It twists light into darkness and convinces you it still shines. It is the echo of ego, pretending to be God. This is why Jung warned, all haste is of the devil. Because the false conscience never waits. It pushes, rushes, demands immediate action. It feeds on urgency, on the intoxication of certainty. It wants you to move before you can see. The true conscience, in contrast, is patient. It speaks softly, almost shyly, and it never forces. It waits for the soul to become quiet enough to hear. Von Franz wrote that when you stew long enough in inner conflict, a hidden line of clarity begins to form. The direction becomes known not through reason, but through stillness. And that is the difference between the divine and the demonic within us. One whispers only when invited, the other shouts through every silence. But in a world that worships speed, the false voice wins easily. We mistake urgency for purpose, emotion for guidance, impulse for intuition, and we call it authenticity. How many times have you felt an overwhelming conviction, a voice that said, "Do it now, say it now, end it now," and only later saw the wreckage it left behind? The false conscience speaks through obsession. The true one speaks through peace. Yet both feel alive, both feel real, and that is what makes discernment so excruciating. To separate the two, Jung advised, we must learn the discipline of inner stillness, to stop reacting, to let the storm pass before naming the wind divine. Because every inner voice claims to be truth, only time reveals which one was God and which one was merely our fear wearing a halo. So when the whisper comes, before you follow it, wait, breathe. Listen not to its volume, but to its vibration. The false conscience shouts for control. The true one invites surrender. And in that difference lies the fate of your soul. Every human being, whether they know it or not, is bound by two contracts. One with society, written in words, laws, and expectations, and one with life itself, written in silence. The first demands obedience. The second demands truth. The contract with society says, fit in, be useful, play your role. The contract with life whispers, become who you truly are, no matter the cost. Most people honor the first and betray the second. They build respectable lives, collect approval, and grow steadily hollow. But the few who choose differently, the ones who listen to the faint trembling voice of conscience, enter a lonelier path. It is the road of those who would rather be rejected for truth than celebrated for imitation. The South African writer Laurens van der Post called this loyalty to the inner voice the personal contract with life. He warned that anyone who breaks it may still appear peaceful, but that peace is counterfeit, a shallow quiet that hides the deeper agony of self-betrayal. He wrote, "No man can refuse to obey this voice and ever know any peace again." Jung understood this as the final test of individuation, the willingness to stand alone in obedience to something invisible, the courage to trust that the path of conscience, though narrow, leads not to isolation but to integration. To follow conscience is to accept exile from the false world so that the real one can finally appear. It is to lose everything that isn't truly yours, and in doing so recover the one thing that is yourself. This is the secret at the heart of every myth. The treasure only appears once the hero refuses to betray his inner guide. The helpful animal must be protected, even when the village mocks it, because it is not an animal at all. It is the soul's instinct for truth, and if you harm it, you lose far more than your innocence. You lose the map to your own becoming. The old fairy tales knew what modern man forgets. Wisdom is not the absence of contradiction, but the ability to walk between opposites without losing your center. The voice within does not promise comfort, it promises wholeness. So when life presents you with that impossible choice between what the world expects and what your heart demands, remember the rule that no story ever broke. Never harm the helpful animal, because that animal is your conscience. And your conscience is the living bridge between who you are and who you are meant to become. If this reflection awakened something in you, if it reminded you of the quiet voice you once silenced, remember, that voice is still waiting. Listen to it. Protect it. And if you wish to keep walking this path of remembrance, subscribe to Alchemia of Mind, because the journey of awakening has only just begun.